Hello again, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I'm building the Estes Nike Aero model rocket. This is another one of their E2X series, which are the easy to assemble. Most of these go together in about an hour. And this is what's called a scale-like or pseudo-scale rocket. It's meant to look kind of like the Nike series of sounding rockets, but in this case, to my knowledge, there was never one called the Nike Aero. This particular kit does kind of resemble the Nike Tomahawk, but that's what makes it scale-like, is there was no actual rocket called the Nike Aero, but it looks kind of like a scale model. All right, let's go ahead and open this up and make sure we've got all of our parts. Alright, so find your instruction sheet, and if we open that up to the first page, that will have our parts list in it. Alright, so we have two fin assemblies, the upper stage and the lower stage. Now, even though this is a model of what would normally be a two-stage rocket, the model itself is only single stage. Okay, we have some decals, the upper body tube, lower body tube, motor mount, a very short shock cord, transition, launch lug ring, nose cone, streamer, engine retainer clip, and centering rings. Okay, checking back over here, looks like we have all of it. So I'm going to clear this away and we will get to work on the motor mount. Our first step is to assemble the motor mount, and the first thing we need to do is mark a few lines here. So get a pencil and a ruler. Alright, this is our motor mount tube, and on one end of this, on the inside, I'm just going to mark aft for the back end, and that way I don't get this turned around later on. Okay, so from the aft end, we need a mark at 16 millimeters or 5/8 of an inch. I prefer the metric system. Alright, another at 3.8 centimeters or 1.5 inches. It's going to be right there. And then one at 4.4 centimeters. And these are all measured from the aft end. Alright, now the middle one here is going to be where the engine clip actually goes in, and so when that engine clip's in place, it's going to cover my lower mark here. So I'm just going to extend it a little bit so I'll be able to see it with that engine clip there. Alright, now we're going to take a hobby knife and cut a 3 millimeter wide slit, about 1/8 of an inch, at that second marking. And this just needs to be big enough to put the engine clip in. So then take the engine clip and use the end that just has the right angle bend in there, and that should pop right into our slot there. Alright, and so you can see where I extended my line down here. Alright, next we're going to take one of the two green centering rings, and I'm going to slide that on and over the clip and all the way down to that line. So right about there. Okay, now inside here, get up where you can see that even better. Okay, the part of the clip that's extending to the inside of the motor mount there is also acting as our engine block or thrust ring. So this does not have a separate thrust ring. Alright, then we're going to take the other ring here, and that's just going to go right down to our top mark there. So with everything in place, they're showing just gluing fillets around there. I think you'll get a better bonding job if you don't do that. So I'm going to move my top ring down below the line, and here apply a bead of either wood glue or white glue. All right, I'm just going to run this around. All right, now you don't want it too heavy because this isn't a very big part. So I'm just going to use my finger now and spread that around. And now I'm going to move my ring into the glue again until I reach that mark once more. And now you can put a fillet around there. Alright, but make sure that you keep the top surface of the ring free of glue. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to move that ring down below the line. Put a bead of glue around that. And it won't hurt it if you get it on the engine clip. It won't stick to it very well. Alright, and once more I'm going to spread that evenly around. Okay. Alright, and now I'm going to move that ring back to where it was. Just watching for the line. Okay, there's my line once more. Just barely seeing it, but that's good. Okay, now one thing to be aware of is in doing this, the glue tends to grab fairly quickly. So you don't want to put that on and let it sit there and then try and move it. All right, once again, go ahead and fill that in around there. If you've got excess glue on your finger, you can put a fillet on the other side. But by running my rings through the glue like this, the fillets are less important. Alright, now I'm going to let that completely dry while we go on to another part of the rocket. While the engine mount is drying, we can go on to assemble the upper body tube and the fin assembly. And the first thing we want to do here is check for things like this. This is called flash, and it's just little bits of plastic left over from the molding process. And what you want to do is just carefully cut those away without cutting your fingers or other parts of the rocket. Alright, check on the nose cone as well. Looks okay. Alright, so two things we're going to do here. We're going to put this on this body tube by sliding it from the top down. Alright, like that. This thing here you can ignore. This fin assembly is used in some other smaller rockets, and in those cases this slot is for an engine retainer clip. There's no engine retainer clip on this part of the body tube though, so ignore that slot. Alright, now when this is fully in place, it's going to be flush with the fin assembly like that. Okay, now what they show is putting some tube type cement right at the bottom here of the body tube and then moving the fin assembly into that. What I'm going to do is actually move that up. I'm going to put my cement like right below where that is going to be. And the reason for that is that'll give a bond between the entire fin assembly and not just the very back of it. Alright, other thing I'm going to do here is, instead of using tube type plastic cement that they're showing here, I'm going to use a gel type super glue. And the reason for that is plastic cement is good for gluing like to like. So polystyrene plastic to other plastic, it's good for that. For dissimilar surfaces though, like cardboard to polystyrene, gel type super glue is going to work better for that. If you don't have it, if all you have is the tube cement, for plastic models, you can use that. This just gives you a little bit firmer grip. And so I'm going to go up about 3/4 of the way of where the plastic would be on this. I'm going to put a bead all the way around. Alright, I do want to have a tissue ready here because any excess glue that squirts out of there, we want to wipe off that immediately. Alright, so with that in place, now I'm just going to move this down. Okay, and kind of move back and forth here as I do until that is flush with the body tube. And if you have any big globs of glue there, then this is the time to remove them. Alright, so I've got not too bad. A little bit there. Just wipe that out. Try to not wipe over the plastic surface because it'll show. Alright, so you can wipe inward there. And then I want to make sure that the launch lug on this fin assembly is not plugged with glue at all, and it's not. Okay, so we can just set that down for a moment. Now for this part, I don't know why they don't glue this on. Theoretically, you could use this really long tube here as a really skinny payload bay. I am not going to though, and so you can either follow the directions here and just apply some masking tape to this if it's needed. Okay, because you want this really firmly in there, otherwise when the ejection charge goes off you may lose the nose cone instead of ejecting the streamer. It did just the opposite of what I wanted there. Got a little bit of glue on the fins. Okay. I prefer to glue this in, and I'm going to do it just the same way that I did with the fin assembly. Alright, so I'm going to take my gel super glue again. You can use the tube type plastic cement. And once more I'm just going to put a bead of glue right on the inside of the body tube. And in this case, any excess will be forced downward. So now I'm just going to apply the nose cone here. Twist it back and forth a few times to seat it well. Alright, and now I'm going to let this entire assembly set aside to dry. Next we're going to prep the lower body tube here. And the first thing we need to do is draw a line down its length. Now you can do this with a door frame, or you can use this handy marking guide that Estes makes. Either one works fine. This just works a lot better under the camera. And draw a light line down the length. You want this to just be barely visible and easily erased. Okay, and just like I did with the motor mount, I'm going to write aft on the inside of one end of this tube so I know which way I'm facing. Okay, and then we're going to cut a notch at 9.5 centimeters here from the aft end. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 9.5 centimeters there. Okay, and then I'm going to cut that hole right across the line. Now this one's going to be a little bit wider than what we had for the engine clip, because this is where the shock cord's going to go. Okay, and once you've got that in there, you can go ahead and erase whatever's left of the cross line. And I would go ahead and erase kind of above and below that too. It'll make it easier now than trying to do it later. Alright, and so now we're going to first put the fin assembly on. Now, like we did with the upper one, look for any flash that needs trimmed off. So we've got a little bit here. Alright, oh, that looks pretty good. Okay, so first we'll put the motor mount in, and then we'll put on the fin assembly. Now I'm going to do mine a little bit different. So what they show is taking and putting glue on the surface of each centering ring, and then putting this into the aft end. Okay, like that. Now what that's going to do is basically squeegee the glue downward. and you probably end up with some right around the tube here. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. You can do it this way if you like. Just be aware that you may get some glue mess coming out the bottom there. Alright, but what I'm going to do is I put this up against the tube. So when this is installed, the two tubes will be flush like this, and then we'll have a centering ring there and a centering ring there. So what I'm going to do is take a cotton applicator, and I'm going to put the glue in the tube where that ring is going to be, and then also for this one. For the upper one then, I'm going to measure down just below where that ring is going to hit, and I'm going to put my thumbnail there. Okay, then go ahead and use either your white glue or your wood glue. Alright, and here I'm just going to dip that in. Alright, so I've got my applicator coated. Alright, make sure I've got the aft end here. And I'm going to put this in without touching the side until I hit my thumbnail, and now I'm just going to coat glue around the inside of the tube. Alright, now I'm going to insert this just a little bit. I'm not into the glue yet, because now I'm going to put some glue up inside here. Now this is kind of tight, so I'm going to use the stick end of my applicator. Alright, but this way each ring is going to pass through only its own glue, instead of spreading it all over the inside of the body tube. Okay, now this excess glue that dripped down there, you can just pick that up. It won't hurt anything to leave it in place. Alright, so now I'm going to align my engine clip with the line. Now I'm just going to push that in flush. And here you can use a ruler to make sure that you are flush. Just like that. And now I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes before we go on to mounting the fins. After the motor mount has had a few minutes to dry here, then we're going to go ahead and put the lower fin assembly on. And like we did with the other plastic pieces, again, check for plastic there. We already got that one. While you're doing it, go ahead and take the launch lug ring here and check it. Mine's got a little bit right here. Just trim that off. Alright, we're going to use this piece next. Alright, so first take the fin assembly here, and the slot should be facing the rear. Alright, right now we're just friction fitting here. This is going to be really tight. Alright, and oh, that is really, really tight. Okay. Now if we want, we can try coming in from the bottom here. And I think it's going to be really, really tight as well. Yep. Okay, so what's going on here is there's a little bit of a taper from the opening in the aft end to the opening on the forward end, and so this is just slightly narrower than this is. And the way to fix that is to use a little bit of sanding paper here. Alright, so I'm going to use some 150 grit sanding paper, and I'm going to sand the inside forward portion here of that fin assembly. It probably won't take a lot of sanding, so just give it a few swipes here back and forth, and then try again. Okay, so that's feeling like I'm hitting pressure about 6 or 7 millimeters down. So I just need to increase the depth of my sanding down inside there. And just try to avoid hitting the outside with the sandpaper so you don't make the glossy finish dull. Alright, so now we'll try this again, coming down from the front. There we go. It's still snug, but I can move it now. So I'm just going to move that toward the bottom. Now when this is ready, now we're not gluing anything yet, but when we do, it's going to get glued like that. Okay. Alright, now up here, this gets a little bit confusing. It took me a couple times reading it. Okay, now Estes does this on several of their rockets, but this one has a little twist to it that's actually probably a good idea, but I hadn't seen it before. So first thing I'm going to do is just trim the fuzziness off the ends of my shock cord here. This is going to make them easier to work with. Okay, and now I'm going to take my hobby knife and just widen the slot that I made. Right. Now I want it open more, I don't want it wider side to side. And now I'm going to put my shock cord in that hole. And if it doesn't go immediately, go ahead and just make that opening a little wider again. Okay, and you can actually use your hobby knife to get it started in there. Alright, and you'll be able to see it coming in to the tube there. And then you can take a finger, if you've got little fingers. My finger's a little bit too fat. I'm going to use some tweezers here. Alright, I'm going to pull that up through. And now continue that, leaving about that much there. Okay, so they're going to leave what have they got here? I don't think they give me 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch. Alright, so about that far. Alright, now on most of these that I've done in the past, what they do is feed the ring. Now this ring has got a tapered forward edge, so make sure that's facing forward when you do this. Alright, that's going to get the shock cord fed through it. And there's a notch on the inside there. Alright, and that should line up with our line. Alright, so most of the Estes rockets that have this, that is way too tight. Okay, you can see it's actually molding the body tube there. Alright, so like the fins, we're going to have to open that up just a little bit. Alright, so once again, go ahead and take your sandpaper and just sand a little bit of the plastic out of the inside of the ring. Alright, then we'll try this again. Again, making sure that it's in the proper orientation. Alright, that's moving a bit easier. Okay, I still don't like the way it's molding that though, it's kind of strange. Alright, but nonetheless, okay, what we're going to do is this is going to go over the elastic. And that's usually the end point for most of these models, okay, is that you glue it in that place. What they're having us do is go past it, like that, and then putting the glue up here, and then when we force this back up, it's going to catch that once more, and then force it through the glue as well. Alright, now, like I said, this will probably give you a stronger shock cord mount, but it also means we're going to have a lot more glue in places. Okay, so they are using the tube type plastic cement over here, And again, I'm going to go ahead and use the super glue instead. Alright, so they're showing this going right forward of the line here. Right around here. You're not going to need a lot. If you are using super glue, be extra careful that you don't glue your fingers to the rocket, because this is going to force glue forward, and that's the one thing I don't like about it. Go ahead and put a little glue on there as well. Alright, so normally super glue and plastic cement are not good for elastic because they can degrade it. Hopefully it'll be okay here. See, now I'm pushing this back up. And the idea here is it's supposed to trap that elastic there, which it's doing, but maybe not quite as much as you would think it should. Just a little bit off there too, but I'm pretty much stuck with it at this point. Okay, and that's, again, something I don't like about this method is once that glue binds, you're stuck with it. Okay, I've got a little bit of excess coming up here, and you can try to wipe that away if you want, but I think it'll just smear. So instead, I'm going to go ahead here and just cut off the remains of shot cord there. Okay. Now, when we go to glue the fin assembly in place, we need to make sure that the launch lugs are aligned. Now, if we had got this perfectly aligned along this line here and perfectly aligned here, then these would be perfectly aligned already. Right, but my ring moved a little bit there. Fortunately, it doesn't really matter if this slot is exactly over the engine clip because it's not needed for it. Okay, this is another case where Estes is reusing a fin can design, but it doesn't need to have that slot in place. So instead, I'm going to just first of all, without gluing yet, look along the length of my body tubes here and use it kind of like a gun sight. So if I'm perfectly straight with the tube and perfectly straight at the same time with the two launch lugs, then I'm in line. Alright, which in this case, you can see now I'm off here about 2 or 3 millimeters from where I should have been had everything lined up here. Alright, if you have that same problem, don't worry about it. That's why we didn't glue all this together at the same time. Alright, now, just like I did with the upper fin assembly, I'm going to push this up a little bit. Alright, once again, I'm going to use super glue rather than the plastic cement, but you can do either. Okay. Put a contiguous bead around, though it doesn't need to be very thick. And then we're going to make this flush with the body tube. So the body tube, the fin can, the motor mount, everything should be flush. And if I do this right, in one shot, I will keep it in line with my launch lug as well. Okay, so flush like that. Don't glue your fingers to it. Okay, make sure that we are still in line. If you have a section of launch rod, you can use that to help align this as well, but not everybody keeps that with them while they're building. So you can use the optical method as I'm using here. Alright, so that's all in line. Alright, now we need the transition here. Okay, now this is going to join to the upper body tube. No glue here yet, so that's going to go in here. Alright. Now, the upper body tube, as I mentioned, does have a launch lug built into it, but it's not needed. Okay, so you can just ignore that. It'll go wherever you want it to. What is needed, though, is that we need to run the shock cord here up through the top. Almost there. And you may know this is a really short shock cord. If you have extra shock cord material, I would suggest that you at least double the length of this shock cord. This is really, really small. Alright, now we're going to tie a double knot around this eyelet. Alright, which is a little bit harder than usual because everything is below us here. Alright, but just go ahead and get in. There's a single half hitch or a single knot, and we'll just do one more over that. And try and keep the free end here as short as you can. Okay. Alright, but then the main part is going to go down below like that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and cut off most, but not all of that free end, so it doesn't get in the way. And then we'll also go ahead and put a little dab of white glue or wood glue on that knot, just to keep it from unraveling. Okay, and now we're going to glue this part into this part. And this will be very much like what we did with the nose cone and with the fin assembly down here. So once more, you can use either the tube type plastic cement or the gel type super glue. I'm going to use the latter. Run a bead all the way around the inside, just inside the edge. Okay, and then you're going to insert the transition here. Try and keep the elastic away from the super glue or plastic cement. Alright, and then once that's on, just move it back and forth a little bit to seat that into place as well. Okay, and now we're going to let that dry. I'm just going to straighten out my shock cord here. And then our last piece to do is the streamer. It's not a very long streamer. If you have streamer material, you might want to consider putting say double that amount of streamer on. It is a very lightweight rocket, so it's probably going to be okay. Alright, now they show tying it into place. I don't like doing that because that knot gets in the way. So instead I'm going to take a piece of wide cellophane tape here and put about half of it on one side of the streamer. Alright, now it turns out my streamer is not quite square, so you might want to square off the end of your streamer here. Alright, then you take the tape, put that on there. Alright, and then I'm going to take my shock cord. I'll place the streamer under it about halfway down. Alright, put the streamer onto the tape right next to put the shock cord on the tape next to the streamer, and then fold the tape over both the shock cord and the streamer like that. Okay, so that's how it's attached. And then instead of trying to roll this up from the end, first just fold it lengthwise over itself a couple of times. Alright, and then once it gets short enough to manage, you can go ahead and roll this up like that. Alright, if you're getting ready for launch, put 2 pieces of recovery wadding in there. If you're just storing it, don't worry about that part. Alright, and then just slide that down and put the 2 pieces together, making sure you don't trap anything between the shoulder and the body tube. And like I said, this launch lug doesn't really do anything, although it might get in the way of the rest of the launch lugs there, so don't line them up like this. Turn it off to one side or even all the way around. Okay, so structurally we're finished here. I am going to let this dry completely for about half an hour before I come back and put the decals on. And just as an added safety here, I'm going to pull this back apart. Alright, so I'm going to come back in about half an hour here, although to your time it'll be like half a second, and then we'll finish the whole thing up. Okay, my glue is dried for well over half an hour now, and so I'm going to assemble this once more. Now, prior to coming back to this, I did wash my hands thoroughly, and that is in preparation for the decals, because we don't want the skin oils and such to interfere with the adhesion of the decals. Okay, so there we're assembled once more. Now this rocket will fly just like this. Decals are not necessary for flight, and they are purely up to your own creativity. You can use the pattern shown here in the illustration and on the packaging, or you can use something completely your own. Okay? You're the one that built the rocket. You put the decals where you want to. Now, given that, I'm going to go ahead and at least try to put the decals on in the suggested places here. So we've got this orange wrap here is meant to go at the top of the main tube, or the upper tube I should say. And so here you just want to gently peel these off and try to handle them by the corners as much as possible so that you don't lose the adhesion. And here I'm going to use the edge of my body tube as a guide. So I want that right on the very edge. Okay, and this is going to tend to lift up the chrome coloration as well as the white down here. So try and put it on very gently to begin with. And I'm going to wrap that around. And it's getting up, oh, see, yeah, got up a little bit high. So when I tried to pull it off, the coloration definitely came up. Okay, now I'm going to overlap. You can see I didn't quite get that straight. But because it's lifting up the color, I'm not going to do anything about it. It would just make it worse. So once you've got it on, go ahead and squeeze the bubbles out as much as you can. Okay. Now since I glued my nose cone in place, it's not a really big deal. If you didn't glue your nose cone in place, you could take the nose cone out and do the decal that way, and then at the end you could just take a sharp hobby knife blade and trim off any overlapping decal there. Okay, so this looks fine, especially when it's on the launch pad. Nobody's going to notice it. Alright, and then we've got the Nike R.E.A.R. Alright, we've got two of them here. So the vertical one is going to go on the upper tube once more here. And I'm going to turn this around, so I'm going to put it on the side that does not have the launch lug on it. So the launch lug that doesn't even get used here is over there. Alright, I'm going to put it over here. And remember, this turns, so it doesn't really matter eventually. Okay, so you can put it wherever you want on there. So I tend to put it opposite the launch lug, but since this isn't a functional launch lug, I'm going to go ahead and put it 90 degrees from that. Okay, and once again we just need to remove. This is often the hardest part, just getting the decal off the sheet. There we go. Okay, and now again I'm going to lightly apply this and hopefully get it as straight as I can. So if I do that, that is just slightly off. I'm going to try and pick it up without tearing the body tube coloration. There we go. Okay, I'm going to lay that down again. Okay, and then put that down. That looks pretty good. So now once more go ahead and squeeze out the air working from the inside to the outside. Okay. Alright, for some of these other ones, I don't really see a place on either diagram for this decal, although it looks like it probably can go right here. Alright, but for the lower tube decals, I want to put them so I'm away from the launch lugs. So that's where I can do the U.S. Air Force. So there's two U.S. Air Force, two logos there, and then these go on the fin tips. So I think since there's two of them there, I'm going to do it at 90 degrees from the launch lugs. And also there you can still see a bit of that line that we drew, so I'm going to erase that before I do anything else. Make sure you get your eraser leavings out of the way so that they don't stick underneath the decals. Alright, so that Nike arrow, I think I'm going to put right up here. So I'm going to put it flush with the top of the lower body tube and just wrap that around. Okay, and that looks like it's what it's supposed to do. Alright. Okay, I'm going to wait on the Air Force things there. I think I'm going to do the fin tips next, because I'm thinking I might put these on the fins. Alright, so these will go out here, about like that. Okay, and there's enough that you could put one on each fin tip, or you could put one on both sides of two of the fins. So that's kind of up to your personal preference there. I think I am going to do one per fin. Alright, so that gives me one of those on each fin there. Okay, so I think I am going to then alternate here the Air Force initials and the symbols here. So I'm just going to put this on one fin like that. Okay, so it's the opposite fin that's got the little trim on it there. And then for the next one, I'm going to put on the initials over here. And these, if you need to reposition them, it's going to be easier because you can pull these up without removing any color. Alright, and then go back to the insignia here. Alright, and then the last one here. That. And then we've got a little tiny Estes here, and I don't think that's a separate thing. No, that's actually just part of the label there. If you want to cut that out and use it, you could. Alright, now you may have noticed here that my rocket keeps separating. And that's something that will be the last check here. So when you've got this all ready, give it a shake. Alright, if it's coming out that easily, you need to do a little work on there. And the easiest thing to do is just apply some masking tape to the shoulder. So I'm going to stuff that back in there. Okay, and then just take a piece of masking tape. And depending on how loose it is, you may not want a full circumference first. You might try half a circumference. Alright, so I'm just going to push that in a little bit there. Alright, that feels a lot firmer. So now, if I shake it, it doesn't come off. But if I give it a little bit of tension, it'll still separate. Okay. In fact, I may use just a little bit less there. Alright, and then I'm just going to trim this off. So it's about time for a new blade in that thing. Alright, and one more time then. Put the streamer back in. Okay, and then really all you need to do is line up the fins. Alright, and again, that if you line up all three launch lugs like that, this will probably interfere with this one. So I'm just going to turn that 90 degrees one way or another. Okay, reline up my fins, and that is the completed rocket. Okay, so total time in real time was less than an hour, and after about an hour of drying, this is ready to launch. So have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.